Welcome back, class. This is Lesson 2C, the Arian controversy. Now we want to look at your notes, make sure you get the spelling on this right. We're talking about the theology of Arius, who was a presbyter in Alexandria. And so we begin in Alexandria. Arius lived from 256 to 336. The roots of the conflict lie in Origen's Christology on the one hand and a fear of Sabellianism or modalism on the other. Origen's view of Christology was that the Son and the Spirit were subordinate in the Trinity to the Father. The modalism was about maintaining the unity of monotheism. And so these two ideas come together in Arius' mind. And he's influenced by Greek philosophy. And so he comes up with this notion that there was when Christ was not. There was when Christ was not. This is a catchphrase that he used. In 318, Alexander, who was the bishop of Alexandria at the time, called a meeting of all his presbyters and asked them to expound upon the creed. And Arius openly accused the bishop of holding to modalism for asserting that the Father and the Son were of one essence. So a regional synod was called in 320 to 321 of the bishops of Egypt and Libya, and they excommunicated Arius and his followers for heresy. But Arius was a very charismatic kind of guy, and he built a strong following. He had a great deal of popularity. His church was located in the port area of Alexandria, and he was very popular in the port area. And so what he did was he went and looked for other bishops in the empire who would support his position to try to have him reinstated. And as a result, Emperor Constantine called the first ecumenical or worldwide council of the church in an effort to preserve the unity of the empire with regard to the Christian faith. So this is called the Council of Nicaea I. This is the first Council of Nicaea, met in 325. Eusebius of Nicomedia, you got to remember we have two Eusebiuses at the same time at this council and dealing with issues. We have Eusebius of Nicomedia. He was the leader of the Arian party at the Council of Nicaea. Arius was not allowed to speak because, one, he was not a bishop, and two, he had been excommunicated. So you needed to be a bishop to speak and address the assembly. So he got Eusebius of Nicomedia to be his spokesman. Eusebius had a certain deal of influence over the emperor, but Arius was exiled. When the council made its final decision, Arius was exiled, but allowed to return in 328. The Arian party then gained power, and that resulted in all of those who supported the Nicene Creed and the Nicene Council's decision being exiled. So Constantine was not resolute on which theology prevailed. He just wanted unity in the empire at whatever cost. Alexander was Bishop of Alexandria at this time, and upon his death, Athanasius became his successor. So we want to talk about Athanasius and Alexander for a moment. Athanasius accompanied Alexander to the Council of Nicaea as his personal secretary. At this time, Athanasius was a deacon in the church, and he accompanied Alexander as his personal secretary. The only hint we have to Athanasius' ethnicity is that at the council he was referred to as the Black Dwarf. The Black Dwarf. In the aftermath of the council, after Alexander died, Athanasius became the most important Nicene leader in the church. He based his doctrine of the Incarnation on his understanding of the doctrine of salvation. His understanding of the incarnation was basically this: only one who was truly God and truly man could affect our salvation. A lesser creature could not do that. And so Athanasius was bishop in Alexandria when he wasn't busy being exiled by Constantine or one of Constantine's sons. Constantine sent him into exile. Constantius sent him into exile. And when they did this, they would put a puppet patriarch on the throne in his place who would do their bidding. Athanasius was able to convince a group. You got to understand terminology here. We have several different Greek terms floating around. The Arians said that Christ was heterousios, that is, of a different essence than the Father. The Nicenes said that Christ was homoousios, of the same essence as the Father. And then there was a middle ground group, sort of in between, called the homoousios party. They believed that Christ was of similar essence, or like essence with the Father. And Athanasius was able to convince this last group, the homoousios party, that to believe that Christ is of the same essence with the Father does not lead to modalism or Sabellianism. So, the Nicene Council met May 20th, 325. The Creed of Arius was presented to the council. The creed asserted that the Father alone is God, the Son is a creature essentially different from the Father, that is heterousios, and that the soul of Christ in the incarnation was the Logos, only the body was human. Now, according to one tradition, and nobody's really been able to thoroughly substantiate this, but it's a long tradition, St. Nicholas was at the Council of Nicaea, having endured the last rounds of persecution. St. Nicholas rose from his seat and slugged to the floor the person who presented Arius' creed. So that gives you a whole other image of St. Nicholas to talk to your children about. The creed of Eusebius of Caesarea was presented, but failed to address the problem. It was sort of a moderate middle ground creed, and it failed to address the problem directly. The Creed of Nicaea was brought forth after a great deal of debate. It affirmed homoousios, that is, that Christ is of one essence, same essence with the Father. This was recommended by Constantine. We'll talk in a moment about who influenced him there. Eusebius of Nicomedia refused to sign the creed, and all those with him who refused to sign the creed were exiled, but later restored. Some at the council preferred the idea of homoousios, of like or similar essence. The Orthodox view dominated from 325 to 330, and then fell out of political favor, and Arianism dominated from 330 to 361. Now, Constantine brought with him from the West a personal chaplain who was a bishop from the West, from Cordova in Spain, named, now I can't think of his name. But anyway, he was influenced by Tertullian. And so he was the one who suggested this language of same substance or same essence as the Father. So many people believe that this is where this came from. And so what's the aftermath of the council? Alexander died in 328. Athanasius became bishop in his place and was exiled 5 times. 5 times. The Eusebian party charged him with violence. He was accused of murder. Interesting story. He was accused of murder and of sorcery. He was accused of having murdered a certain person and having cut off his hands for the purpose of practicing divination. They had the man in hiding, and some of Athanasius' deacons went and found the man and brought him to where the trial was being conducted in Tyre and kept him cloaked and covered. And when the trial was going on, Athanasius had this cloaked person brought forward and said, "So I'm accused of having killed this man," and removed the cloak, and there's the man standing alive. And then he said, "Now which hand was it that I cut off? Was it this one or this one?" And he pulled out both arms, and his hands were there, still there, through the entire thing into upheaval. And but he was also tried for being a schismatic, for bringing division to the church, for maintaining the Orthodox cause, and exiled anyway. This was under Constantine, around 336, 337. Constantine II allowed Athanasius to return. Then he was forced to flee to Rome amid the conflict between Constantine II and Constans from 339 to 346. During this time, he wrote 4 discourses against the Arians. He returned to Alexandria in 346, and Constantius, who was an Arian supporter and now ruler in the East, exiled him from 356 to 362. He had a brief return under Julian before being exiled again in 366 to 364, and then a brief return, very brief, 365 to 366, he was exiled again. So he was exiled a number of times. Now, during this time period, he also produced a very important little letter. It was a what we would call an Easter letter, a Paschal letter. In 367, he wrote a letter to the churches under his rule, and he recommended to them as scripture a list of books. And in that list of books, he lists all of the books of our Old Testament that we as Protestants accept, and the first ever published list of all 27 of the New Testament books that we, as the church worldwide, accept as New Testament books. This is the earliest complete list of the 27 books of the New Testament. And so that's a very important document from Athanasius. We had a group called the Anomeans, and they were a splinter group of the Arian movement. They held power and had councils at Arles, Milan, and Sirmium in 353, 355, and 357 respectively. These synods were designed to shore up Arianism's claims to doctrinal fidelity, and the council at Sirmium in 357 was the high mark of Arianism. It involved a denial of the true divinity of the Son. It condemned the Orthodox terms used in the Nicene Creed as unscriptural. It made a distinction of the divine nature of the Son contrasted with that of the Father as far as possible, and said that the Son is unlike the Father. In 358, the Homoiousians had a synod at Aeneia in which they affirmed that the Son is of like essence with the Father. And then in 359, there was a creed issued from Sirmium that said the Son is like the Father according to the Scripture, but no essential likeness was admitted. And then there was also a reaction in this time period against Julian the Apostate. So these are important high watermarks for the Arian movement before we have the resurgence of the Orthodox position under the Cappadocian theologians, which we will talk about in the next lecture.